trial in Minneapolis about the killing of George Floyd, and about the need for a reckoning, a racial reckoning in our society. And so we embrace peaceful protest. And at the same time, we want to prepare, because we know that there are two approaches to protest. One is peaceful, principled, strong protest, and the other is property destruction and violence. The former we support, we respect, and we uphold. The latter we do not. And so we want to make sure that our city is prepared for any possibilities, and to recognize that when it comes to the very difficult role that our law enforcement officers have, that it is a difficult balance, because we want to protect property, absolutely. But more importantly, we want to make sure that we are protecting life. And so it is a judgment call, and it's sometimes a judgment call in the moment, whether or not the police intervene in the moment to arrest people who may be engaged in vandalism. And the judgment call, of course, depends on the severity of what is going on. And so there is no cookie cutter formula here. We have a very good police chief and a good police department. And we want to just have these discussions as a city council, and yes, as a community, before the potential protest to begin, and say loud and clear, we uphold peaceful protest. And we are a capital city. We're the center of public policy making, not just in the state, but in the country. But at the same time, we are going to be very clear that we do not accept and will not tolerate anyone who comes to our city or lives within our city who is bent on destroying property, or even more seriously, hurting people. And so that's it. I know that there were a lot of requests to hear from city officials, and so I just thought I would get on the Zoom here with you and tell you what the reason for our meeting, which lasted about 45 minutes, and how we are thinking about our preparation for potential events ahead. We know of no specific protest plans. We know there was a protest last night. We have no specific threats that we are responding to, but we have lived through this, our community, not just after George Floyd's killing, but after the election here in November, with the weekly activity downtown with the Proud Boys and others. And so we want to be prepared, because we think that that gives us the best chance to respect and uphold the people who come out to make sure their voice is heard, and at the same time protect people and protect property as well. Thank you.
All right, we've got two questions in the queue. First up is Rowena.
Hi, Rowena.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much for holding this forum tonight. I really appreciate it. My question is, like you said, we have gone through this before. We've been on the ground with the police. And is it going to be similar, Mayor, to last time, where if it need be, will the National Guard be on hand? Have they been notified already? Is that something that it may go in that direction again?
Well, I hope, and we hope, that the National Guard is not necessary. That is certainly a last resort. And yet, we want to be fully prepared for any possibilities, because it is our role and our job, frankly, our obligation, to both protect the peaceful protesters and also to protect our larger community, our neighborhoods, our business corridors, and our police officers. And so we have a balance to strike here. And the National Guard, to me, is a last resort. I do know that, these situations are very difficult. I reflect back to last June, and We all sign up for the criticism from all ends, but some folks said we didn't intervene with the National Guard soon enough, and others said we should have never called upon the National Guard. And I get that. This is a balance. These are judgment calls, and hopefully that isn't necessary. And we just want to be prepared, and we want to strike the right balance between protecting and upholding peaceful protesters, and also protecting the safety of all of the people in our city.
Next up is Chris from Cap Radio, and then Teresa from SACB.
Hey, Mayor, how's it going? Two quick questions. One, what sparked this emergency meeting? And two, was there anything actually concrete that came out of the meeting?
Well, there was the protest last night, and there was some property damage. And the city manager and I thought it was best to convene the city council and to just be thoughtful about our preparation, because we do have the benefit of having the community and the community leadership having gone through this before. And so there are always lessons learned, and there are some new council members as well. And we thought it was important just to begin having a discussion, and that's all that it was.
All right, Teresa Clift.
Hi, Mayor. Did you all make any decisions during the meeting, or can you share anything about what the discussion was about with future protests? What are you guys going to put out barriers in front of city buildings or anything like that?
We did not make any firm decisions. It was just the beginning of a discussion, but better to be prepared, even over prepared, than to have a meeting after an event occurs, especially given that we have lived through this all before. And these are tense times in our country, and yes, in our community. I will say, if I might editorialize for a moment, that, you know, I'm proud of the stands that the city is taking here. We are putting forward progressive police reforms that have the potential actually to bring people together. When you look at the Department of Community Response, when you look at the introduction of our new Inspector General just yesterday to independently review any serious accusations of misconduct involving death or serious injury to a resident by the police, when you look at the Police Commission recommendations that we heard yesterday and that we plan to vote on in the next couple of weeks, our city is moving forward in a smart way. I respect, and we respect, the very difficult role that our police officers play in our community. And I think they do, by and large, they do a great job. And yet these issues are national in nature. We've also experienced the issues, the controversies, and the problems in our own community. And we are a capital city, and it is a place where people are going to gather to make sure that their voices are heard. And again, we uphold that. And at the same time, we want to make sure that we do everything possible to promote the peaceful, nonviolent expression of very strongly held views about what needs to change, not just in our community, but in our country as a whole.
Excellent. I have Rowena with a follow-up, and then Nick Miller from Cap Radio.
Mayor, I agree with you. It is best to plan ahead rather than to react to something after it happens. And with that being said, was there any kind of discussion this evening where maybe you were looking at a better plan than last time on protecting the buildings? There were so many business owners, small business owners, that had just devastating damage done to their shops, forced to close for so many days. Is there a plan in place in the event that God forbid, but that the protests take that direction?
We want to do everything we can to protect the property of our business owners, our downtown business owners, because I think they have been through a tremendous amount of hardship and pain. both the coronavirus and the damage that occurred after the George Floyd killing. So we are very, very aware of that, very sensitive to that. I want to do everything we can to protect them. At the same time, our police department has a very difficult challenge, and that is to balance and ensure that whatever action they take in the moment does not escalate a tense situation in a way that could lead to the death or serious injury of peaceful protesters, of the police officers themselves, of innocent bystanders, of anybody. And so that's why there isn't a cookie cutter approach here. But yes, we are very cognizant of what went on in June. We know how important our downtown is as the economic engine of our city and of our region, and we want to do everything we can to protect their property.
Thank you.
Nick Miller up next, and then a follow-up from Chris.
Mayor Steinberg, thank you so much, as always, for your availability. A follow-up to the use of force question. Has there been specific discussions about what is acceptable use of force to protect property and what is not? I mean, for instance, in past years, 2019, we saw 84 people arrested for the keying of cars, as you know. Last year, to protect property on J Street, we saw individuals who were hit with projectiles with canisters that had tear gas. Can you go or look at any of the specifics about what is acceptable use of force, what is not? And in the context of, we know that there's legislation at the Capitol, attempting to zero in on this issue as well.
Well, so no, I can't tell you of any specific plan. I mean, the use of force obviously should not be the first resort. And I do know, in fairness to our police department and our police officers, they have also tried through many of these protests to maintain a safe distance from the protesters so as to not invite confrontation. And so we all want the peaceful expression of strongly held views on the most important issues facing our community and facing our country. And we want to be prepared, and we want to always, I know the police department chief and believes this too, we always want to focus on de-escalation wherever possible.
Okay, Nick had a quick follow-up, and Chris dropped his question. So
just real quick, I'll ask directly. The use of gas and tear gas on protesters, the use of projectiles, whether foam, whether beanbag, are those acceptable uses of force? Can you discuss that directly?
They ought to be a very last resort. I mean, only if, they ought to be a very last resort. Everything ought to be focused on de-escalation, maintaining distance, not provoking. And this is where the dilemma comes in with regard to the property question asked by Rowena, because do the police intervene directly when there is a graffiti or what one consider minor vandalism if the risk is that it will lead to some sort of a physical confrontation of any kind? This is the balance here. And we want to, I think, tell the public that there is a balance. And certainly the use of any kind of force ought to be the last resort, not the first resort.
okay,
Thanks,
Chris now has a follow-up question.
To follow up on Nick's questions about police and use of force during protests, obviously you face criticism, City Manager Howard Chan as well as and Police Chief Daniel Hahn as well. In regards to police use of force, specifically at some of these protests, a lot of activists and organizers say that the violence from some of these protests only come when police show up in some of these riot gears, donning some of the less lethal weapons that Nick described. Was there any conversation tonight or prior to maybe pull back some of that in the future, knowing that some of the things that may be coming up in the Chauvin case, Sunday's police killing in Minneapolis, things like that? Is there any discussion about pulling back some of the showing of police when these protests are happening?
Well, first of all, the police, well, let me step back for just a moment. The police should always, and I believe in most cases, most every case they do, keep their distance from people who are protesting peacefully. I do not buy the premise. I'm sorry. I mean, I support all the use of force reforms that the police commission brought forward yesterday, including making deadly force a last resort. But I do not believe that the property destruction that our downtown businesses experienced after the George Floyd killing was the result of police being present. I don't buy it. That's an excuse, and it's not right. Property destruction is not right. Now, you know, people make the false, they try to put us in a box to make a false choice between property destruction or violence to individuals. They're both wrong. Obviously, violence and injury or death to an individual is worse, but they're still both wrong. And so what we say is that protest peacefully, protest with urgency, protest with strength, but destruction of any kind, vandalism of any kind, property destruction of any kind, physical violence of any kind is not what we want in our city. Thank you.
Okay, so Chris, you had a quick follow-up, and then I have Joe from ABC 10, and then Rowena from Fox again.
Yeah, so I guess back to Nick's point on when the acceptable use of force at these protests, then does property damage mean that it's okay in any way for, I guess, just going back off of last summer's protests after George Floyd's death, for some of these projectiles being used against protesters? It's back to Nick's question, is the damage to property okay for that?
Each of these incidents and allegations are being investigated by our Office of Public Safety Accountability. And you will know, and the public deserves to know, what the actual findings and what the actual truth of some of those allegations are about what led to that. And again, the dilemma is more often than not expressed in the opposite way, which is that the property owners downtown wanted more aggressive action by the police department. That's what they wanted. And the police department, I think, actually showed significant amount of restraint in not intervening in situations where they could have. And so you do get it from both sides, and they get it from both sides. And that's fair, because that's the business that we are in. But in terms of any of those individual incidents that occurred where, you know, different versions of the tape are presented, we have an independent investigator, the Office of Public Safety Accountability, Dr. Letitia Watson, who is looking at all those incidents and will report publicly what occurred and whether or not it was right or wrong, and what the policy ought to be going forward. I'm saying that going forward, we want to see peace, and we want to see peaceful protest, and we want to prepare for all eventualities to keep the peace,
Next up is Joe from ABC 10.
Hi, thank you, Darrell, for talking to us. To play on the theme that my colleagues are asking about force during these protests, was it discussed what are the repercussions if police escalate these conflicts during protests?
It is not the policy, and it is not the intent, and I don't believe it's been the practice for police to escalate. Again, I disagree with the premise, at least in terms of the George Floyd, the aftermath of the George Floyd killing, in terms of the protests in downtown Sacramento. There were many people that came out and peacefully protest to express their outrage at the killing of George Floyd. But there were some people who either came to town or from Sacramento who came to destroy businesses. And I respect and uphold the former, and we draw a line when it comes to the latter. But even when it comes to the latter, the police department did not escalate. In fact, the business community was frustrated that they didn't escalate. And so there you have it. And I want to make sure that we are, again, prepared, that the emphasis is on nonviolence, and that we do everything we can to not escalate, and to enable, to allow, to respect, to uphold those who may come out over the next couple of weeks, who want to have their voices heard about the events in Minneapolis and what we should be doing in our community.
Okay, I have a question from Rowena again.
Mary Lynn?
I was just gonna say, this will be the last one, okay? Because we don't have that much we can share specifically, and it's now just being parsed 10 jillion ways. So, so this will be the last one, okay, guys? Have a good night.
Go ahead.
Myself. Okay, I'm here. Mayor, like you had said, some of the business owners were hoping that maybe police might have taken a quicker action the last time around. So maybe it wouldn't have gotten as bad, the vandalism, had they stepped in. And the way that I look at it is, if someone broke, you know, a big, the front glass to a business on a regular, you know, on a regular Wednesday, it wasn't during any protest time, police saw it, they would take them into custody or do what they had to do. So these protests, no matter how emotional they are, that shouldn't change police having to do their basic job, right?
Now, let me take a little bit of issue with the premise of the question. If the police see an individual in the middle of the day breaking the law, they can enforce the law. The difference with these protests is that there are hundreds of people gathered at one time. And so the balance is this. And you see, even in the very good press availability today, in the questions, that even reporters ask the question from very different perspectives. One perspective is that the police escalate. And the other perspective is that the police are not doing enough. And people in our community have very different points of view about how we as a city should deal with these very difficult and sensitive issues. And I'm not a guy that ever sits on the fence. I have very strong points of view on all these policy issues, and I express them. But it is a balance when it comes to how law enforcement should deal with the escalation of a protest that is no longer peaceful. Because you're right, the property owners say, many of them say, intervene right away and arrest people on the spot. And then the critics of the police, and even the police themselves, say there is a real risk in intervening too quickly, because to intervene too quickly with massive numbers of people could actually result in people getting hurt or killed. You know, we saw this. Well, I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it there because I think that explains the dilemma. So we're going to be thoughtful. We're going to be balanced. We're going to work together. We're going to communicate. We're going to learn some lessons from our prior experiences, and we're going to do everything we can to keep the peace here and seek justice.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you
Thank
so
you
much for
all.
your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye. Have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Mary Lynn.
Bye-bye.